Welcome to the hard launch episode of Convos with Cody. I'm Cody Malloy. My first guest, I could not be more excited to have on. Jacob Robinson, one of my friends from law school. He was ahead of me. He was one of my mentors. He was my contracts TA. Jacob has been running his own podcast called The Law of Code for 6 or 7 years now. You should go check it out. It's about AI and crypto, and he's interviewed so many people, including members of Congress in the United States. Jacob is an amazing person. I hope that you enjoy this episode. If you can please do me a favor, follow, subscribe based on whichever platform you're on, that'd be great. It makes a big difference. Thanks so much. And all the conversations that you've had with lawyers and AI and crypto and everything, is there a certain conversation that jumps out to you that changed your perspective on something immediately?
I like that question. That is definitely not an easy one. It's been about 6 years since I started Law of Code, and I've spoken to probably about 250 plus lawyers right now on topics ranging from how AI is changing the legal profession to how rules on crypto are being created to things around free speech and questions about open source software and whether the Trump administration or other governments can actually implement rules that constrain speech and constrain code. So there's been a lot of conversations. One that comes to mind was from episode 205 of Law of Code with Peter Van Valkenburg. He's the executive director of Coin Center. And we were talking about free speech and code. And he had a line, I forget who he was citing, but it's that I might not agree with what you have to say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. And I forget who exactly it was that he was quoting. But I think that's such an important line and something and a principle that guides me in all the work that I do when I'm talking about the rules. And my goal with the podcast is to help people understand the rules that shape our world and sort of tie emerging tech with law. I found when I was in private practice, I was amazed at the disconnect between what the lawyers knew and what the programmers knew on both sides, on the tech and the legal side. There's a big misunderstanding there, or a lack of understanding. And so that quote really shaped how I think about the rules, because the goal isn't that everyone's going to agree and get along all the time. The goal is that we have rules that if our enemies are allowed to enforce them, we're still going to be okay with them.
Well, I find that I don't agree with a lot of the people that attack certain, whether it's podcasters or media, whatever, when they're saying, why would you platform this person? And my response to that is usually, how are we supposed to get better or resolve our differences if we don't do what you and I are doing right now and have conversations with people?
It's true. Well, we should
Right?
talk about our differences then, Cody. What are the no,
Hey,
it's true, man. Well, they say the best antidote to bad speech is more speech, and people
yeah.
should be, and I believe in people, that people make the best choices for themselves. And if someone has an opinion you disagree with, it's really easy to say, that's a bad person. I don't want to hear a word they have to say. It's harder to say, okay, well, why are they thinking differently? How can I learn from them? Maybe I don't want people to think like them, but the only way that can happen is by understanding how they got to that place. And so the only way you can get to that understanding is by talking to them, by finding out what led them to have this opinion that you disagree with so much. So if you really truly did care about changing people's opinions, you would listen to them.
Yeah. Do you know who Jefferson Fisher is?
No.
I don't know if I'd label him as a podcaster, but he's been on many podcasts that I've listened to. He is still a lawyer, I think, but he has a very big platform online. If you look him up, he basically discusses conversation and kind of how to hold better conversations with people. And I just saw a clip from him earlier today where he said, because as a lawyer, he knows how framing language can be incredibly important. And he said, don't say, for example, I disagree. Just say, I see this differently. When you speak from perspective in terms of agreeing or disagreeing, you're just basically saying to someone, hey, I hear what you're saying, but I actually kind of see this from a different angle. And I thought that was, I mean, he's a lawyer, so of course he knows that picking language can be very important. But I also wanted to ask you as well, you started your podcast in law school, correct?
Yes.
Okay. What compelled you at the time to start?
because I wanted a podcast like this to exist. When I was in law school, I'd go for walks all the time, hikes, do stuff around the house, cook, work out, whatever it was. And I couldn't read things. I just had to either listen to music or listen to podcasts. And so I listened to a lot of podcasts. I'd listen to the Huberman Lab, Founders Podcast, the Acquired Podcast, Hardcore History, I'm a big fan of as well. There's a lot of great podcasts out there. There weren't any good legal podcasts that I could go listen to and learn more about the law. I wanted to be a better lawyer. I wanted to be equipped to enter the legal profession. And there was nothing that I could listen to that I would enjoy listening and would finish and think, oh, I really learned something new from a bunch of people. And so when I realized that there wasn't a plan to do this for as long as I've done it now, it was just, I wish this existed. Nobody else is doing it. So I'm just going to reach out to a couple people, have some conversations, and see what I can learn because I want this to exist. And so instead of listening to the podcast, I ended up doing them and building them myself. And I'm glad I did because it's been unbelievable how good it's been for my career. I've learned a tremendous amount. I really enjoy it. I think it's my favorite thing to do. So I'm really glad I did. And it turns out there were other people like me who thought the same thing, who thought there weren't enough good legal podcasts out there. So now I'm trying to build basically the hardcore history of law. So I don't just do one-on-one interviews anymore. Every episode typically consists of 8 to 10 interviews that are compacted into one. So the one I produced today was about how lawyers are using AI in 2026, which to me was a great one to hear because we hear a lot of talk about it and we see people post and think we're way behind. Like I thought, I'm way behind in terms of what the best lawyers are using AI for. Turns out, it's not rocket science what people are using it for. So I really like getting deep on certain legal topics.
Well, actually, I'll rephrase it. What is your goal with your podcast now, and how has your goal evolved as you've done it?
It changed about 3 months ago now. For the first 5 years, 6 years, the goal was just to have as many conversations with interesting people as I could to learn and share those conversations. 3 or 4 months ago, I was watching a podcast by the Acquired guys. So I don't know if you're familiar with that podcast, but it's 2 guys. They go really deep on businesses. So they'll go deep on the NFL, they'll go deep on Costco, they'll go deep on Ferrari. They pick a brand or a business and go deep on how that brand evolved, where it came from, the history. Episodes are like 5 hours. It's basically an audiobook. And they summarize a lot of they go read a bunch of books, have conversations with people and summarize them. And they make like $4.5 million a year. They do really, really well just from sponsorships and events. JP Morgan Payments is one of their big sponsors. So when I listened to the podcast where they talked about how they monetized, how their business worked behind the podcast, I thought, man, wouldn't it be nice if someone did something like this for law? And I've kind of been working on this for about 6 years. What if I really hit the gas? And so I did for a couple episodes and I changed how I did it. And those first 2 episodes that I changed my approach got over 100,000 impressions. And I went from having like 10,000 impressions per episode to 100,000. Then the third one I did got 150,000. And I thought, okay, I'm on to something here. I gotta lean into this. Clearly, this is what people are looking for. And so it was a big signal for me that the change was working. So since then, I've just been leaning in. I'm trying to get to $4.5 million a year. I'm quite a ways away from that, but you got to start at zero.
When you say impressions, which platform were you referring to, or platforms if you're adding?
Yeah, that's across platforms. So X, LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple.
What is your number one traffic source in terms of impressions right now?
X right now.
Really? I wasn't expecting you to say that.
Yeah. Well, you got to remember, I mean, it's where a lot of people go to get news, to get updates. It's where a lot of people listen to podcasts I've seen. So it's, and I find video clips do really well as well. That's been a big help. I hadn't been doing video clips because I'm a lawyer by trade, not a podcaster. So I've been figuring this out as I go. But yeah, X has been the biggest driver of traffic for sure.
It's interesting that you say that because I have actually this year made a big effort to not go on X very much because I found that it was just mentally exhausting me with what I would see on my timeline. But you saying that does make me reconsider, okay, do I maybe want to be more active on X? It doesn't mean I have to go on and digest information if I don't want to, but it might be good to have a better presence there. So I appreciate you telling me that, because that has been the lowest platform, if you will, on the totem pole for me, just in terms of interest lately. But you also mentioned the business of podcasting.
Mhm.
And I've noticed, because I remember I put a comment on one of your posts, and I've seen some since, that you have recently, it looks like, gotten podcast sponsors. Do you care to share just kind of how that came about, and maybe how long it took you to get to that point? Just for people like me, for example, that are just starting and are very curious about the business of podcasting and just kind of trying to figure out how you get to that point.
Yeah, man, I'm still figuring it out as I go as well too. It's sort of like
Yeah.
you're building the bridge as you're walking across, right? So
Oh, yeah.
uh, what I saw with the acquired guys, I can't say too much about like what I'm doing because it's so new and it's still ongoing. But
Fine.
what the acquired guys do, which was really interesting, is they set one, and I try to copy this. It's they set a very high price because they know their audience is premium, and it's a way to reach, like, the numbers might
Mm,
not be the same that you'll get with, say, a food influencer or,
mm,
one of the Paul brothers, but the quality of listeners are different. And the quality of my audience is people at the Securities and Exchange Commission, people at the
right.
CFTC, people at the OSC, people at regulatory agencies, people in-house at private practice at the biggest law firms in the world. These are partners billing millions of dollars a year, some of the most important people in the legal profession who listen to this. And so I can set a premium price just like the acquired guys can because of who the listeners are, even though the numbers might not be the same as some other ones. And then that way, what you do is with that's sort of one way I think about it. Then the other thing is only working with people who I think actually make the brand stronger. So if there was a company or a business that might have the money and be interested in sponsoring, but might not fit the brand, like Nestle or something, it doesn't make sense for me to partner with Nestle. But partnering with Cahill, which is one of the sponsors, which is a world-class law firm in the US, makes a lot of sense. It strengthens the Law of Code brand, and it strengthens Cahill's brand. It gets them top of mind whenever people are listening to conversations about digital assets. And so I try to find win-wins, so that way when I'm talking to potential sponsors, I can genuinely say, this is going to make your business better. This is going to make my business better. The synergies are going to be beneficial for both of us. But it still takes longer than you'd like, of course, especially with law firms, because they've got to figure out how it's all going to work with the partnership, how the legal ethics rules apply, what I'm actually going to say is the promotion. So there's a lot. It's like so much more work than anyone expects that goes into it, but it's a lot of fun.
Okay, before I forget, I know I wanted to ask you, and I think that it might be selfish on my part, but what do you wish you knew when you started? Because that's more so me. So I want to know what I could do better right out of the gate if you could go back in time.
Yeah, there's probably three things I would say if I were to go back and say, okay, Jacob or Cody, in your case, you're starting a podcast. What are three things that you should know? Number one, the most important thing is make something that you wish existed. So what is it that you want to listen to? Like, if you wouldn't listen back to your own podcast because you want to see more about what other people are doing in a particular conversation, then you got to switch it up until it is something that you will. There is always something that you'll want to listen back to. So find what that is. That's the number one thing. Number two thing is, don't settle if the podcast is 95% of where you want it to be. Don't stop until it's 100, because they're going to sit around for years and years and years. And you don't want to have to go back and edit it. But also, that's going to be oftentimes people's first impression of you. So someone's going to listen to the podcast. If they think it sucks, they're never going to listen to it again. So every time you're up to bat, you have to be swinging for a home run. And I know you're a baseball guy, so you get that. You can't settle for singles or doubles, because that's what people are going to associate with your podcast. And that was something, I will say honestly, I did for quite a while, because I didn't think of the podcast as a business. And then the third thing I'd say is just be ambitious. Like, people see who you get on the podcast, and that changes public perception of it. So when I started off, my first ever guest, I think you know him, Professor Kianif of Windsor. He was my law school professor.
I had him.
It was great to have him on. It was so nice for him to be generous with his time. It was also easy for me to ask him. Whereas last week I had a Congressman, Tom Emmer, on the podcast.
I saw
I've
that.
had the chief legal officer of Coinbase. I've had huge characters, not only in the crypto space, but just in law generally. And it's become because I've just asked, and people say yes a lot more than you'd expect. So be ambitious, don't drop any standards, and take a long-term view, and make sure it's something that you'd listen back to. I'd say those are sort of my 3 pieces of advice.
So I highly agree with you in that I just completely botched what Jefferson Fisher said not to do. When you say to go all out on your quality with your podcasts. But one thing that I've heard so many podcasters talk about is they say, and I'm talking people that are in the thousands of episodes, they'll say, if you go back, like Stephen Bartlett from DOAC, Chris Williamson from Modern Wisdom, Rogan has said this. They all say, if you go back to my earlier episodes, they're all horrible. I had to do this 500 times to even start to kind of get comfortable and kind of get used to the flow with it. So I feel like, because I do a lot of content, and actually tell you, I've actually gone viral in the last week, and I can come back to
Nice,
that.
man.
It's like crazy actually stories, but I'll come back to that because it's not relevant right this second. But I've basically learned that you have to do reps to, and this isn't just podcasting, by the way, Jacob, this is in life. You have to do the reps to then have the hindsight to turn around and say, oh, that audio wasn't as clean as I thought it was, or whatever. But you kind of have to do it and screw up to then look back and correct. Can you relate to this at all?
Oh man, I wish I couldn't, but it's. I went back and listened to, I think, like episode 12 or 11 that I did, and if you listen for the first minute and a half or 2 minutes, you can hear me actually say, before I thought we started recording, I go, all right, Drew, I'm going to count down 3, 2, 1, and then we're going to begin the podcast. I'm going to cut this part. 3, 2, 1. Hey, Drew, welcome to the Law of Code pod. And I left that whole thing in. And so everyone who's listened to that can hear me tell them, I'm going to do a countdown. I'm going to cut it off. And yeah, I can very much relate to that. I can also relate to that in the newsletter that I do for The Athletic. I write the NFL newsletter there. It's now the biggest NFL newsletter in the world. And I've done we're at 500, I think, next week, editions of that newsletter. So I've done about 250 Law of Code podcasts, about 500 newsletters. And if I go back to the first newsletters I did, they're awful. And they are awful, and I didn't think they were awful at the time, but they're awful compared to where I think the newsletter is now. And that's the important thing, is just you're continuously growing and getting better. So if there's something you want to do, even if it's not your job, even if you're not getting paid for it yet, just start it. Now's the easiest time in history to start something. So that way, by the time someone wants to pay you for it, or there's a demand for it, you're on iteration 200, 300, and you can say to them, look, I'm actually way better. I'm worth this. And you can get what you think you're worth, and you'll be in a much better position.
Yeah, and I want to touch back on something you said at least 10 minutes ago. When I've been doing my pilot project of this, which was a year ago, and then more recently, I've been doing some solo episodes just for practice and everything. When I realized how much I was enjoying doing this, I was like, oh, this is game over, man. If I'm liking it, I will just do this. I'll be so stubborn about it. I'll just keep doing this until I get way better than I can even imagine. But I know that it's going to take a lot of work. I know it's going to take a lot of reps, but I'm stubborn enough to do it.
It's the best, man.
So I'm not worried about it.
I love it too. I've literally been driving home some days and thought, like, as long as I can keep my costs low enough, I'll get to keep doing the podcast. And I want to make it my full-time thing because it is so much fun. It doesn't feel like work, just having conversations. And we've had a lot of conversations before, and I know you like talking.
We've had so many conversations that, and there's other people too, I can say at the end of the conversation, I'd be like, I feel like if I recorded this conversation, like in a, obviously like an environment like this, I feel like other people, if they listen to this, would find this interesting. Now, of course, not everyone, but there's like a segment, there's a specific audience out there that would find such and such conversation interesting. And then I was just like, well, why don't I just start recording more of these? And it can just be kind of like a FaceTime call. It doesn't have to be like, I have no interest, for example, in doing a gotcha podcast. You know, like that has no interest to me. But I will tell you, I do see this in the long term. Like, I know it might take 5, 6, 7, 10 years, whatever, but I see this as a business asset. Like, yes, it's fun and everything, but as someone that has now built up my own law practice and company, which 2.5 years has blown by, but a lot has changed since for the better. I keep asking myself, okay, from a business minded standpoint, how do I keep growing? And I want to ask you, because you do podcasting, you do your newsletter, which I want to ask you about. Correct me if I'm wrong. Are you actively practicing law?
No.
You're not. Okay. So you divide your time right now, it sounds like mostly between your athletic job and your podcasting. Is there anything I'm missing?
Yeah, and I do legal consulting as well. So I'll work with clients that are in Canada,
Right.
international, in the crypto space mostly, who are trying
That's
to
right.
figure out how either they're working with outside counsel. I also work closely with
Okay.
some lawyers as well who just need an extra set of hands to help with things. So I bring a quasi legal perspective to that work as well. So it's busy. It's busy, but yeah, those would sort of be the three buckets.
That's awesome. How did you get into the athletic and writing there?
When I was in law school, COVID hit, and we had a lot more time on our hands that wasn't being filled with social activities or really anything. So I played a lot of Warzone. I had a lot of fun on Call of Duty. But then I got a little bored of that. And I also had a business at the time in law school that was selling fantasy football draft boards. I don't know if you know what those are, but
I
basically
don't, but you've
printable
told me.
sheets, and
Yeah.
you'd go put the stickers on the board. And so I was selling those online. I was trying to get customers. And so I saw a thing about how if you have an email list, now you can email people with discount codes. So I thought, okay, how do I get an email list? I started a newsletter. So I posted the newsletter I wrote a newsletter. I put a bunch of memes in it, didn't take it too seriously, put it on Reddit. It went viral. I woke up the next morning with like 2,500 subscribers and thinking, oh shit, I got to do this newsletter now. And
Yeah.
so I did the newsletter for 3-4 years, didn't really make any money from it, stopped doing the other business. But it was a lot of fun and I enjoyed doing it. And it was something I wish existed. Eventually, the Athletic sponsored it. A bunch of other sponsors came in. Then, after a year of sponsoring, the Athletic said, "Hey, would you want to write for us?" I thought, sure, like you'll pay me to do that. Like this is an actual job that people do, writing about football. I never thought about it as a career. My family never went to paths like that. I didn't know anyone who had been in a path like that, and so they had me apply to the job. Cody, I did not want to miss out on this job. So instead of just send my resume and cover letter, which they had asked for, I put together a 40-page PDF that looked at everything every other NFL newsletter in the world had done, was doing well, was doing wrong, and why the Athletics newsletter could be better. And ideas for cadence, for subjects, for co-authors, for guest appearances. I basically laid out what I would do if they gave me the job. And there were about 1,200 applicants. Thankfully, they picked me and I was able to do it. And it helped that I had written, at that time, I'd already written about probably 300 close to NFL newsletters already, not getting paid for it, but just sort of setting myself up unintentionally for a job that I didn't know I was going to get.
Do you miss practicing law?
Definitely. Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, the only reason I paused is because I was sick and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And every doctor I talked to just kept saying it was stress. And
Yeah.
so, you can switch your job, but there's only so much you can do before it's like, okay, well, if this job is causing me to sleep only 2 hours a night, I should probably just quit this. So I quit that job without having any other backup plan. Thankfully,
Yeah.
got the athletic job 2 weeks later. I'm on sort of a medical pause right now and on my legal practice because I do the consulting. Like I've helped on M&A transactions and everything. I'm still keeping my skills sharp.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm going to go back to practicing just because my goal now is to make the podcast my full-time career as well as the newsletter.
Yeah. Spoiler alert to anyone listening. I'm very honest about this with people. I don't care to be only a practicing lawyer my entire career because I recognize just from a business standpoint in the legal industry, you can scale, you can hire people, but everyone is whether it's you or assistants, associates, whatever, everyone has to trade their time for money in law. It's a service industry, right? And we only have so much time that we can sell. So I started to recognize from an entrepreneurial sense, okay, is there some other business out there that you can scale and per se make money in your sleep, which is by podcasting, for example, like that's It's very hard to monetize a podcast, but that's just an example of something
Mhm.
else. I'm trying to see the big picture. You told me earlier in this conversation to be ambitious. I'm starting to write ridiculous goals down in my notes app, because from people that I follow online that are way wealthier and more successful than I am at this stage, a lot of people say, like, make ridiculous goals. A lot of
Mhm.
people seem to not make their goals big enough, so that, and then it's like they hit them, and then it's kind of like, oh, okay, well, I made it, But that's a bit of a double-edged sword, Jacob, because I can tell in my own head that you can just move the goalposts forever. Do you know where I'm coming from
Right.
in terms of
Right.
satisfaction?
Yeah. No, I know. And I've never been a big goal guy. I've never really, I mean, I have written down goals at
Yeah.
certain points, but I've never found that writing down a goal has made me want to do it. What I've started to do now is think about everything I do, every little habit. And I love this quote that I think about a lot, is that one compromise is 1,000. So if you're willing to compromise on something, you're probably willing to compromise on everything. So this could be something as simple as, like, when you're walking down the street, if you see a thing of trash that's fallen besides the trash can, are you going to pick that up and put it in the garbage, or are you going to walk by and sort of ignore that? And if you take that and you extrapolate that over the rest of life, which I tend to do because maybe I got to chill, but if you extrapolate that over the rest of life, and every time you notice something's not the way it should be, you go to fix it, that's going to compound, and that's going to lead to huge benefits to whatever it is you do. And so I try to think about that when I'm doing the podcast, because, like you said, it's a hard business. There's so many people producing content. So, like, every time I do a podcast, I want it to be better than the last one. I go back, listen to the last one. What could I have done differently here? How could it have been better? For you, I think you're in a really interesting position where you have your own firm, you have a legal practice. And so thinking, what are the people who I'm servicing? What would they want to know about? Like, that could be a good angle to tackle on the podcast. There's so many questions in law that are unanswered, but being ambitious is the most important thing, because if you are ambitious and you have this mentality of doing everything to the best of your abilities, there's no chance you're not going to succeed. Now, the timeline might not be what you want. Like, it took me way longer. I was hoping sponsors in year one. It took about 6, but eventually, as long as you're relentless, you can get there.
Mr. Beast often says, I'm paraphrasing a bit, idea, rep, iterate. Do 1% better the next time. Do that hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. And Alex Hormozy, I don't know if you know who he is, but says the same thing. Like, if you just do an unreasonable number of reps, the laws of the universe kind of just make it, like, dictate and say, eventually something's going to kind of crack. And look, I want to respect your time. I know that we're getting close to your out. I want to ask you, for anyone who is either applying to law school or maybe in law school, for the record, that's where you and I met. What do you think law school doesn't teach that they should?
Oh man, I don't know if we have time for that.
Maybe
That's
you
a
don't have
big
enough time
list.
for that.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Man, there's a lot of things law school doesn't teach. I think if I just had to pick the most important of that, it would have to be how to. Oh man, there's a long list. Like, a couple things that come to mind are how to find the legal work that you like doing, like how to determine what it is you want to do. I couldn't believe how many lawyers I spoke with started doing bankruptcy work, started doing insurance work, because that was where the first job opening was for them. There was no intentionality over where their career ended up. And remember, careers are 30, 40, 50 years sometimes in law. So you're going to do something for 50 years of your life that you just happen to fall into. I think that's one of them. But then the second thing, and I think the most important thing, is how to have an online presence, how to be a thought leader in your space. Because if you're a thought leader in your space, and I mean, not that I'm a thought leader, but, like, I was amazed just from having my podcast, how many job opportunities came across my plate, whether that was in-house, whether that it was at a huge law firm in the US, Canada. Like, I got poached when I was a articling student, basically, to go to another firm in Canada. I mean, and not that I, like, deserved it or anything, but just because I was sharing things online and saying I knew what I was talking about, and trying my hardest to make it that true. I think that is the most important thing you can do in a career, because that's how you end up doing something that you love to do. And that's how you find what you love to do, is by sharing things and seeing what you naturally gravitate to over time. So to me, if you're thinking about what's the number one thing, if you're going to go back to law schools and have them teach, it's how to be a thought leader in any space. Because once you learn that skill once, it applies no matter what field you're in.
Were you scared putting yourself out there at first?
Dude, every other Monday, Cody, I put out a podcast, and like I said, I've done 206 of them now, and I've had a lot more interviews on top of that. But every time I put one out, man, it's the toughest part of my week. I hit send. I think, like, I hope it's good enough. I tried my best, but it's tough, man. And then it doesn't do the numbers I want, and I'm like, oh man, I should have done it. I should have done this, or this. It's hard. Like, every time, it's surprising to me how hard it is, but it's like anything. It's a muscle, right? You get used to the discomfort and you think, okay, it's hard, but I can do it anyways. And I've done it before. And, maybe people won't like it, maybe people will, but I tried my best. And that's why you have to make sure you try your best, or else it's really going to eat you up.
Last question, because I know you got to go. Where do we see Jacob Robinson 5 years from now?
Well, hopefully you're listening to the Law of Code podcast and you see me interviewing some pretty important people in the world. Maybe you, Cody. I know you're doing a lot of great things, and keeping it up with your podcast. Because I think having conversations around the laws that shape our world are so important, and helping people understand the rules that shape our world. I mean, think about playing a board game. I don't know if you've ever played Catan or Monopoly or any of those games. You play those games, you need to know the rules. That's the first thing you do, is you start by knowing the rules, and then you play the game based on what those rules are. We're in a world today where people have no clue what the rules are. No one really understands what they are, but we're all playing these games, whether it's business, health, personal sort of things that we're doing. And so my goal with Law of Code is to help people understand the rules that shape our world. I've started with just crypto, digital assets. It's expanding now to emerging tech. Hopefully in 5 years, we'll be talking about everything that has to do with the law.
I appreciate your answer, and it's interesting because I don't care to have a podcast that's only about law. There are law people that I do want to have on, some of which that some of which that have already told me they're going to come on, and I'm very excited about. But I just want to follow my curiosity and my interest. Honestly, Jacob, for example, if I could get an astronaut to come on and talk to me, that's 3 hours. If that person has 3 hours, that I just feel like I can just go, man. And that's just kind of where I think this is going to go. Do I want to talk to this person? Do I find it? Am I going to find them interesting? Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's pretty.
Well, you're a natural interviewer too, and you ask great questions, and it's fun talking to you. Like, it goes by quickly. So I think you'll definitely have an astronaut before long.
Thanks, man. I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, no, that was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on.